The PlayStation 5 Pro is a massive waste of money.
Yeah, I said it.
I mean, really, what's the actual point of an ever so slightly upgraded version of the PS5? A console well known for having practically no games on it. For $300 more? I mean, it has less than 20 exclusives. Even the Wii U has more. My god, even the Virtual Boy has more. In what universe is the PS5 Pro worth it?
That's just one of the many weird things that are happening with the 9th generation of consoles. So hi, I'm Charlie, I'm back, and let's look at the dark future of gaming.
I've talked about the future of Nintendo in the past, for almost 30 minutes actually, but in case you can't be bothered to listen to me ramble for those 30 minutes, I'll have my buddy Grampsy quickly go over everything you need to know.
Thanks, Charlie. The tale of Nintendo's success starts all the way back to the beginning of the 8th generation of consoles, when Nintendo released the Wii U. The Wii U was a successor to the Wii, Nintendo's most successful home console ever, and was projected to sell 100 million units. However, the marketing of the Wii U led to the absolute downfall of Nintendo's next console, leading them to not only lose the 8th generation, but creating their least successful home console of all time. But all hope wasn't lost for Nintendo. No, they had the 3DS. But they realized that the future of gaming needed to have some sort of way to combine their portable market and the home console market, to create one ultimate console you could play both on the TV and on the go. So after years of development and one cancelled 3DS successor, Nintendo eventually created a console they codenamed the NX, which would later become the Nintendo Switch. Nintendo launched the consoles with banger after banger, like The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild and Super Mario Odyssey. This helped push the Nintendo Switch to become Nintendo's most successful home console ever, and let them win the 8th generation. However, the Nintendo Switch was always underpowered, even since its launch. So they knew that they needed to get in with a more powerful console. And it's really taking them a while. But in 2024, they announced the successor to the Nintendo Switch. At the same time though, Nintendo was taking down fan projects left and right, such as the add-ons on the Steam Workshop for the game Gary's mod that used Nintendo assets, and the popular Nintendo Switch emulator Yuzu. They also bought a company called Shiver Entertainment, but we don't know what that's for.
Thanks, Grampsy.
So Nintendo was clearly leading the video game market with the success of the Switch, along with their games being all mostly well received, with them constantly bringing out games in order to satisfy their customers. It allows you to constantly be brought into a new and magical world that Nintendo created without having to wait years for a game that will eventually be pulled off store shelves in 2 weeks.
Speaking of which,
Sony! Oh boy, do I have a lot to say about Sony. I could bag on Sony as a company for their attempts in the film industry with incredible films like Morbius, Madam Web, and Harold and the Purple Crayon, but I really want to hone in on their PlayStation branch right now, even though the problems I'm about to say is kind of the problems that Sony has as a wider company.
You've heard the joke that the PS5 has no games, right? Well, there's actually some truth to it. Let's look at the amount of games that Sony has exclusively published to the PlayStation 5 as opposed to Nintendo publishing to the Nintendo Switch in that same amount of time. In Sony's first year on the market with the PS5, there was 4 exclusive games. Now 4 doesn't look all that great, but there was also 3 multi-platform games, which means they released on the PS5 and the PS4. One of them came to competing platforms, but Sony actually has this every year because they publish MLB The Show. Sony also had 3 remasters and ports of games that already existed that now have new versions. Sound good?
Yep!
Who the hell? Oh, never mind. Anyway, let's look at what Nintendo did on their first year on the market of the Nintendo Switch. So from March 2017 to March 2018, Nintendo had 7 exclusives. That's already more than the PS5. But there was also 2 multi-platform games. And then there was also 4 remasters, ports, that category. But to be fair, Sony was going through a lot at the time, so I decided to see what Nintendo published within the PS5's first year on the market. They had 11 exclusives. There was also 5 remasters and ports and remakes.
Now that's just the first year of games on both platforms. Nintendo clearly understands that you need a wide variety of games in order to bring in multiple kinds of players. The PS5 games that released within the first year also have a bit of variety, but as we go in on the PS5's life, you'll start to realize that they kind of forgot about the variety part.
But before we get to that, did you know that you could be a member of this channel? That's right! You can get access to videos early, commentaries, other random videos early, monthly updates, and that's just the first tier. It really helps support the channel and me. And trust me, I'll be posting more member videos than Sony publishes games in a year. Don't worry. Anyway...
Welcome back to Guess That Exclusive. I'm your host, PlayStation 4, and we are on the final question. If you forgot, our 3 contestants are John, playing for the Hellish Christmas Foundation.
Yeah, it's nice to be here, plays.
Luigi, who wouldn't tell us who he's playing for. And you, the viewer at home.
Me?
Yes, you. Here's your question. How many exclusives did Sony publish on its 3rd year in the market? A, 4, B, 5, C, 2, or D, 1?
Well, it can't be 1. That would just be pointless. Well, I mean, it could be 1 if they published a bunch of remakes and re-release.
Yes, John?
Is it 5?
I'm sorry, that's wrong. Does anyone else have any guesses? Yes, you?
It's 1. It's 1. That's the end of the bit, guys. It's 1. It's 1. They only published 1 exclusive in 2023. That's the end of the bit. They only published 1 entire exclusive in 2023. And 1 multiplat, and I bet you know what that is. It's MLB The Show, and the exclusive was Spider-Man 2. What? How does that even happen?
I have no idea what their excuse was in 2023. The one game they published was Spider-Man 2, and I did enjoy the game, but it was clearly rushed in order to get out on time. Because imagine if they didn't publish Spider-Man 2 and delayed it to 2024. That would have meant that the only Sony published game for the PS5 in 2023 would have been MLB The Show, which would have been the saddest thing ever. Granted, 2023 was the same year that Sony released the PSVR 2, so they were obviously working on that. And you could argue that the PSVR 2 games are counted as PS5 games, so that's another 2 whole exclusives. Yippee!
Because Nintendo in its 3rd year had 14 exclusives. What the hell? 1 multiplat, which came to competing platforms, whatever. 4 remasters, ports, and remakes, 1 of which came to competing platforms, and that's it. And then within the 3rd year of the PS5, Nintendo had 9 exclusives, 5 remasters, and that's it! Let's look at the PS5's 4th year. 5 exclusives, 2 multiplats, and then there's 3 remasters, because I made this slideshow before they announced Horizon Zero Dawn Remastered. There was something else that happened this year. There's 1 deleted game. What?
Did you watch the PlayStation State of Play in May 2024? The presentation opened with a massive 15-minute long explanation as to what this game that Sony announced the year prior, Concord, was about. The game was a live service game clearly inspired by Guardians of the Galaxy. The game apparently had started development 8 years prior and was finally coming out in August 2024. Sony was going to set up an exclusive beta for players in July 2024, and when they did,
no one played it.
Then the game came out a month later and
no one played it.
The game had pretty mixed reviews, saying it was kind of fun, but like, what was the point behind it? And when I say no one played it, I seriously mean no nobody played it. Sony really wanted to push this game. I mean, they made an exclusive Concord PS5 controller. They licensed Concord to appear in an episode of Secret Level, an upcoming anthology show about multiple video games. They just really wanted Concord to be the next big thing. But Sony had one problem.
No one played it. It's always funny when you say the same joke 3 times in a row.
So on the 3rd of September, Sony announced that they were shutting the entire game down. They were going to give out refunds, of course, and they shut the game down on the 6th of September. The game lasted 2 weeks. I find that genuinely insane. I really do. I don't understand how Sony could have this game that took 8 years to be created to shut it down and pretend it doesn't exist in 2 goddamn weeks.
Sony already has the problem with the fact that they have no games for the PS5, so they think a good idea is removing one of them?
You better be grateful. Back in my day, I could only play games for 5 minutes when I had a coin to put in the machine.
Gramsci, I don't care. But you see, Sony actually solved the problem by making a good game. Astrobot. Yay! A good game! But then they did something atrociously stupid.
What?
Would you just wait for the title card?
The PlayStation 5 Pro is the dumbest piece of technology ever announced for humans' consumption. The PlayStation 5 Pro follows the tradition of PlayStation revisions halfway through their life, such as the PS1, the PS2 Slim, the PS3 Slim and the other one, the PS4 Slim, and most importantly, the PlayStation 4 Pro. At the time, the PlayStation 4 Pro was an interesting upgrade. It promised faster loading times and 4K. Xbox did a similar thing around the same time too, making the Xbox One X, which was an upgraded Xbox One, but it just felt really weird.
It just seemed like they were trying to create a new generation, while also not making a new generation whatsoever. There is not any games that are exclusive to the PS4 Pro or Xbox's Xbox One X. I honestly don't think we should have ever got the PS4 Pro. Imagine going from the base PS4 visuals to the base PS5 visuals. That would have looked incredible. That would have been an insane jump. However, because we have the PS4 Pro, going from the PS4 Pro to the PS5 isn't really that much different. And it's exactly the same on the Xbox side.
But at least around the time we got the PS4 Pro, we were still getting original games that showed off the power of the console. However, now we have the PS5 Pro and, yikes.
Remember this presentation, from earlier? Just because they're making the PS5 Pro doesn't mean they're doing anything to actually push the PS5 Pro, except for goddamn Horizon Zero Dawn Remastered, which is a PS4 game. And in the presentation, they're showing us the differences between The Last of Us Part 2 on PS5 and PS5 Pro. It's a PS4 game! The Last of Us Part 2 is a PS4 game that they remastered for the PS5 for literally no reason. Like, yeah, okay, it looks better, whatever. But to show off your PS5 Pro, you're really gonna show off something that also looks good on a base PS4? And don't even get me started on Horizon Zero Dawn Remastered.
Can you get started on Horizon Zero Dawn Remastered?
Okay.
The PlayStation 5 is the king of remasters. I can't lie, that's like all they've got going on. The very first day the PS5 launched, we got Spider-Man Remastered, a remaster of Spider-Man from the PS4 which came out 2 years prior. Granted, we got this remaster alongside Spider-Man Miles Morales, so it's not like that it was that big of a deal. It was just a cool way to play the original Spider-Man on the PS5. I get it. I mean, it's kind of useless when you can just play the original on the PS5, but it's neat. Sony did this pretty much in the last generation too, where The Last of Us released on the PS3 the year before the PS4 came out, so with the PS4 releasing, they made The Last of Us Remastered with all the DLC on the disc. And that made sense, because you can't actually play PS3 games on a PS4. But not only only did we get Spider-Man Remastered within the first year, oh no, we got 2 others. We got Ghost of Tsushima Director's Cut, which is a game you can already play on the PS5, and Death Stranding Director's Cut, yet another game you can already play.
We kinda already went over this when I was talking about games coming to the PS5 and how whatever, but my god, this is bad.
In the second year, we also got The Last of Us Part 1, a remake of The Last of Us.
But didn't you already say they remastered that game? I think you're starting to lose your mind, buddy.
Oh no, they did it again.
I guess that makes sense though, because you can't play PS4 games on a PS5.
Oh no, as I said earlier, you can play PS4 games on a PS5.
So what's the point of the remaster?
It looks better, to be fair.
Well, surely it at least has new content.
Nope, it actually removes the multiplayer.
Well then surely it was a budget release.
We can't keep playing this game, you already know the answer.
The original game released on the PS3 for $60 US. Pretty simple, that's what games were worth at the time. If you waited until the PS4, $50. That's a pretty good deal, and it makes sense because it's a year older game. So let's see the price of the PS5 version.
What the hell?
So for less content, you pay more than the original. What the hell? Yeah, so I don't get it. But oh boy, it gets worse. The Last of Us Part 2. It's a game that released on the PS4, which would mean that you can play the original on the PS5. So they decided to do a remaster for basically just the textures of the game and add some behind the scenes stuff, which is kinda cool to a certain extent. If you already own the original game, you can upgrade to the new version of the game for $10 US. That is an extremely good deal. It's practically just a DLC for the game. I wouldn't say that it's necessary to get the new version, but if you want to see the new graphics, then just get the new version. And later Sony announced that they were going to do the same thing for Horizon Zero Dawn. Have a remaster and upgrade it for $10 if you have the original. Horizon Zero Dawn is worth literal pennies, so it makes sense. However, you'll never guess what they did.
They made the price on the digital store more expensive. The original version is now $20 more.
Yeah, so instead of it being a $10 upgrade, it's a $30 upgrade. Like, okay, I don't think this upgrade is at all worth it. Horizon Zero Dawn already was PS5 enhanced, so it looks absolutely incredible already on the PS5. But my god, just say it's a $30 upgrade and not a $10 upgrade.
But I also don't really care because the physical copy is worth pretty much nothing. So it doesn't really matter. But it's just not a good look within Sony's already quite atrocious 2024. And the worst thing is, I haven't even mentioned half the things I've done yet.
Layoffs in the video game industry were happening constantly. Over 9,500 jobs were lost in those 6 months alone, and it's only gotten worse, and that is insane. First it started with Unity, Twitch, Playticker, and Discord in January, which affected over 2,000 people alone. Riot Games was next, laying off another 530 people, which was about 11% of the company. Following that was Microsoft, which we can talk about much later. Then Eidos Montreal, which then brings us to Sony. On February 27th, 2024, Sony laid off 900 people across all of their studios, with them shutting down their London studios. This, of course, alongside all of the other industry layoffs, really put a giant sour taste in people's mouth about the video game industry. Seemingly, the entire industry was crumbling. Sony, Microsoft, and more companies clearly didn't know what to do to stop this from happening, and they're honestly not setting a good precedent on what's to come. There is very clearly something wrong in the video game industry, but the general public doesn't know what it is. I mean, there's the rushing of the games to make sure they come out, and then they turn out to be not so good but fixed through bugs, but I think companies just want games to be made in 6 weeks. Just like E.T. was on the Atari 2600, and we all know how that turned out.
But at least we got Astrobot, hell yeah!
What Sony is doing is completely stupid in my eyes, and I honestly don't know how they can recover. But at least they're not as bad as Microsoft somehow.
But I think we'll talk about Microsoft later. They just keep stuffing up to a point where it is impossible to catalog every bad thing they do, because by the time you can actually talk about it, they've done another 5 stupid things. In the future, we'll talk about how Microsoft is going the same way of Sega and how it was completely unavoidable. Like, why do you want to be this? Rest in peace, video games. In another life, you could have been good. But every single studio just keeps stuffing up. Well, except for Nintendo. Well...